listening to The Local Voice on Orion Neighborhood Television, where our mission is to empower community members like you to create, communicate, and connect through television, radio, and video production. Hello and welcome to Views from the Sideline, episode number 3. I'm your host, Chris Pappas. With me is my co-host, Joey Tysick. And joining us today at the desk, our first guest on the show, Garrett Kolodzieg, joins the show to break down all things hoops. You can hear him as host of Colo Sports Corner on 88.3 WXOU The Grizz, Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. You can find him also on the Twitter sphere, I believe, at Colo Sports WXOU. Garrett, yes. Talk to the people. Welcome to the show.
Well, Chris, I'm flattered that I'm your first guest. You've been a guest on my show frequently. I need to get Joey on my show at some point as well, too, here in the near future.
Yeah, we'll get that figured out.
We'll work on the logistics after this program. But no, I'm very happy, Chris. I thank you for bringing me in. I love me some basketball, both pro and college. And anytime I can sit down and talk a little hard or a little round ball, I'm okay with that. So.
And we're happy to have you. We're happy to break it down.
I'm happy to give you my view from the sideline.
There you go. Thank you. Pun intended. All right. On today's show, we talk Michigan over Michigan State, the Golden Grizzlies up and down past few weeks, and how they can kind of redeem themselves after some tough losses early on. We try to patch up the holes in the sinking ship that is your Detroit Pistons. And since we are still just getting started here in 2018, we do some hopeful thinking for the hoops teams in the state. And without further ado, let's get started. Let's talk this Michigan Wolverines-Spartans matchup. Kind of really getting broken down a lot here. Michigan takes down the Spartans at Breslin, 82-72. Joey, what was your take about that game? I mean, Michigan really seemed to have a control of the tempo and the game from the tip-off.
Ooh, this game, Michigan really proved themselves in the Big Ten. But going into it, you knew that they were a strong team of the Big Ten, but you weren't sure if they were that for-sure team. Maybe Purdue game was a bit of a fluke. Maybe they played out of their minds. But in this Michigan State game, they controlled the tempo of the whole game. They're the real deal. They're in that top 4 in the Big Ten, and they're a team you got to watch out for.
Definitely. Garrett, what's your take? What'd you see from Michigan? What'd you see from MSU for that point? I mean, they've kind of dropped off. What's your take there?
So one of the things that I noticed, especially with this game, I think was kind of twofold, but kind of going off of Joey's point, I think this showed me that this Michigan team has grown up faster than I think a lot of fans expected. One of the things that this Michigan team had was there was no question they were going to have quite a bit of talent. Mo Wagner returning, Muhammad Ali, Abdur Rahman coming back for his senior season. You had a guy in Duncan Robinson, a 3-and-D type guy who could come off the bench and give you some good minutes, but you were unsure. You had a lot of freshmen coming in that were going to be playing a lot of big minutes off the bench for John Beilein, and you were unsure. I think this game against the then fourth-ranked team in the country kind of shows you, hey, these kids, there's something there, and they're adapting to Beilein's system faster than people expected. And I think that if you're a Michigan basketball fan, you definitely notice that, and you should be excited about, I think, what the future holds. The game itself, I really was a little shocked at first at how passive MSU was. I think MSU was trying to wait for Michigan to make their own mistakes. And instead, Michigan State made the mistakes themselves, and they weren't able to capitalize on anything Michigan did. If you've watched Michigan basketball over the last 11 years with John Beilein being there, one of the things that they really are proud about is that they love to not turn over the ball. That they're very responsible with the basketball. And we both know that if you're responsible with the basketball, generally good things happen out on the floor. So Beilein did that. He forced MSU to make mistakes, get out into transition, turn the ball over, make some very dumb mistakes. Mind you, they're playing with 4 sophomores and a freshman in their starting 5 and have several young players coming off the bench. Now, yes, Tom Izzo has a deep bench, and that's the way he likes it, but when you have those young kids who had an underwhelming season last year, got off to a very hot start this year, that can get to your head. So I think now maybe we've seen MSU fall back a little bit to maybe where people expected them to be. This is still a very good MSU basketball team. There's no doubt about that. When you have Miles Bridges and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor, I'm going to call him J3 from here on out.
All right, J3, I like it.
So when you got J3 on the floor with Miles Bridges at the same time, good things are generally going to happen. But was this team potentially going to be number 1 for the rest of the year? No. I mean, this has been a very strange year in college basketball. And I think overall we kind of just saw one team arrive and another team realize that they have problems that they need to fix. And luckily, they're getting fixed right now
Yeah,
before the tournament.
and I think you put the nail on the head there. Michigan really controlled the tempo, and they made MSU get into mistakes. They forced 18 turnovers. That's a huge number for any team. And Michigan only committed 7. That resulted in the Wolverines playing at their tempo, the way they like to play, up and down, shooting from the perimeter, spreading the floor, getting out in transition. Huge performance by the Wolverines.
Let me just butt in with
Yeah.
something here quickly too. And I can get both Joey if you want to jump in on this as well too. And I might be, jumping ahead here, but I think now for people to say that MSU is still the better team in state, I think the gap's closed after this game. When you watched what
for sure.
happened, yes, MSU's won the last 5 out of 7, but Beeline's still 8-11 in his career against MSU. He's still gone into his place and beaten them, and he's won a Big Ten title with better recency. He's gone to the national title game with better recency. People who are trying to say that Michigan shouldn't be thought of as a basketball school, I disagree. That gap's closed. I mean, John Beilein has done more with less, almost like what Mark D'Antonio has done at MSU with more with less than I think people give him credit for. And I think all talk now of Michigan not being a basketball school needs to be put to rest. The gap is now officially closed.
I completely agree with that. Joe, what's your take? What'd you see on the floor?
That for sure, Garrett, you got it exactly right. Michigan is a much better basketball program than people give them credit for. They kind of forget about them. And it's kind of like you said, like the same thing with football. Everybody's like, oh, Michigan, they're the best football team. When Michigan State probably in reality is the better football team.
Yeah.
When you go to basketball, it's like, okay, Michigan State, they've had Magic Johnson. They got the Mateen Cleaves 2000 championship. People don't forget that Michigan was in the national championship in 2014. They almost won the national championship.
It was one shot away in 2014 or 15, I believe it was, from getting back to the Final Four.
Exactly, yeah. Those couple teams, Trey Burke, Spike Albrecht, that was some good Michigan basketball. And they've been good since Beilein got there. He changed the culture of Michigan basketball. Yeah, they were down for a little while after he had the Fab 5 years. But as soon as Beilein came in, he changed the whole culture of that program. They're that 3-and-D type of team. They're that dangerous tournament team. And they do so much with their talent. And this year especially, they are much deeper, I think, than they have been in the past. And that's pretty dangerous. And Michigan State saw that because you have all these young guys for Michigan that are stepping up out of their minds. Jordan Poole, Isaiah Livers. They're playing way better than people expected them to. And Michigan has this depth where they can just take people out, bring new people in, and they have so much energy and they can attack you from multiple angles. Mo Wagner's turning into a mini Dirk Nowitzki, honestly. So that gives Michigan State a lot of trouble. And Michigan State is kind of like me and Chris's favorite team, the Detroit Pistons. They're very similar in a way where they struggle to guard the stretch 4 and they don't match up well against it. And for some reason, they don't come out with a lot of energy. And that's just, I mean, hopefully Michigan State will turn it around. I'm sure Izzo will get those guys going because he's one of the great coaches in the college basketball as well. But it is a little bit concerning to see them falling like this.
And one thing that really stood out to me on Michigan's side of things was how under control they were to finish that ball game. Xavier Simpson hit some clutch free throws to ice that game.
If
and
they
that was
could
huge.
still teach him how to hit free throws
Yeah,
altogether.
that was actually really scary.
Joey, how is it acceptable for you? And I know you know, and I know we're just fans here, but I find it unacceptable that at the highest level of college basketball, you shoot 53% from the free throw line. That's unacceptable.
And as a guard, mind you,
Yes.
both Simpson and Charles Matthews are 60% and below free throw shooters. That is a nightmare. Granted, they shot great free throws in this game as a team combined, but that is.
I mean, there was a stretch though.
problem.
People seem to forget there was that stretch there where I believe it was, 75-65. Michigan was up and they missed their first free throw of the game. Xavier Simpson missed a pair. MSU came right back down the floor, missed a couple open threes. Those go down. That's a completely different ball game.
Right.
Definitely.
Michigan got lucky that they rebounded well. They guarded the perimeter pretty well, and they were able to get bodies in the paint and rebound well and draw the fouls and keep getting back to the line. But I had to throw that out there.
And I mean, you get a career game from Mo Wagner to ice the game as well. That played a huge factor. And I want to bring a question up to you guys. Does this win for the Wolverines change your opinion of the Big Ten? Does it change your opinion that it's more up for grabs? Joey, I'll hit you first.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people discredit the Big Ten this year because they're kind of a quote unquote down year. They've had a lot of issues with Minnesota having their whole scandal issue. Wisconsin had some injuries. Northwestern's had some injuries. So the Big Ten overall is down. But those top four, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, and Michigan, I think are very strong teams and should not be taken for granted. It's unfortunate the Big Ten is kind of discredited, but I kind of like that too because they can sneak up on somebody in the tournament.
I think Joey hit a lot of the key points there. I think it's only reaffirmed my position that the Big Ten was better than what people expected this year. I don't know if this necessarily means that Michigan's going to be a Big Ten contender this year and win it all. Because last year they were a good team, had the freak almost near-death experience and then rallied around that and won the Big Ten championship.
Yep.
I just think this year with the way Purdue's playing, with the way that MSU's MSU's going to get out of this rut eventually. The way that those two teams play and the talent that those teams have, I tend to think that the Big Ten's going to run through them. And I do believe that Purdue is the best team in the Big Ten. I mean, just the way that they can score inside at will, but yet go outside to Carson Edwards and the way he runs the game as a heads-up point guard that can also take it to the hole, a guy that's a very headsy type of player on both sides of the floor. I love Purdue, and that's why I think it's a good test to see what Michigan can do going to West Lafayette in a couple weeks and seeing what they do. I mean, they gave them a test at home at Chrysler that honestly I thought Michigan put themselves in a very good chance to win that game.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If a couple things go a different way, you never know what happens. But I want to transition here to, we talk Michigan, we talk Michigan State, another team making some noise around here for a good reason this time. Last time we were on the airwaves, they're sitting 8th in the horizon. It's those Golden Grizzlies. They're up to 3rd in the horizon now. Let's break this down. They've read off
the bear.
Where the bear, Garrett. They've read off 3 straight conference wins after 3 straight conference losses. And I mean, it says everything you need to know. It's inconsistency. Can they be consistent down the stretch? That's the big question here. Garrett, you're our Oakland guy.
Okay.
Give us some insight here. What do you see coming down the stretch for the Golden Grizzlies? Are we going to see some exciting play at the O Arena?
Will they make a run?
I actually think they will. And here's the reason why I actually think that they will. So Oakland got their toughest road trip out of the way early this season by going to Milwaukee and going to Green Bay. And it's always tough to travel there because Milwaukee plays in a very hostile arena. The fans are sitting on top of you. And then in Green Bay, it's just so far away. Your mind is just so wandered. You're beat up because you've been on the road practically what feels like a week. And Oakland was in that game. And they just made a bad shot, just a bad execution, and they lost that game. Then you come home, Wright State, a team that I don't think people were really giving much consideration this year. They're still a well-coached program. They're always going to be a well-coached program. They're always going to be tough as nails defensively. They're always going to shoot really well from 3. Oakland got bit by it. That happens. And Northern Kentucky is, if not the best team in the Horizon League, the second best team in the Horizon League.
All right, I'll say second best. But you got
But what I'll say is this. I think that was the aberration. Oakland also suffered significant injuries that kind of led up to that. And if they had some of the players that got injured at that point, I don't think we'd be seeing this happen. They lost James Beck earlier in the year and Javen Cumberland. Javen Cumberland was a 3-and-D type guard. James Beck is a little bit more of an athletic freak. He can spot up and shoot really anywhere, but he's a bigger guy that can play the 2, even play the wing at some point as well too. Campy has a very thin bench, and Campy loves rolling with 9-10 guys because this is his best team he's ever had. This is the most talented team that he's ever truly had. So I think for him, losing as many as 3 players on this roster, it's tough to try and adapt in conference play where there's a combination in the Horizon League. Mid-major basketball is so different because it's not like your major basketball in let's say the ACC or the Big Ten where you might have one big guy on the inside and the rest of them are athletic freaks. They can spot up and shoot from 3. A lot of times, mid-majors, you might see them play more of a conventional style game, the dump in down low. You might see them do the dribble drive. You might see different, older, conventional type of offenses. Horizon League is a little bit of a mixed bag. And the way Campy likes to run things, he's a transition guy, run and gun type of guy. He wasn't matching up very well with the guys he had. I think it's personally an aberration. I think Oakland's fine. Kendrick Nunn looks fine now on the ankle. Martez Walker's okay now with being a secondary type player. I think Jalen Hayes has really alleviated a lot of the problems that Isaiah Brock has had down low because, mind you, Isaiah Brock right now is really the only rim protection Oakland has. I mean, they were without Brad Brechting, who had a freakish foot fracture that happened in practice just before the season started. And there's a good chance he might not even play this year and take a medical red shirt. So you're already down there. Jalen's changed his game. And Jalen has changed his game to become even more tenacious on defense. But then you've got Braylon Neely, who's top 20 in the country in total assists. You've got Nick Daniels, who's your 3-point specialist coming off the bench. This is still a very good Oakland team. And as long as Kendrick Nunn is still putting up 35 a night, I really don't see where this Oakland team can't go wrong. They have a very, in my opinion, a very winnable stretch of games coming up here soon. They've got U of D on the road. It's always tough to go into your rival's place and win, but
This is a down year for U of D, though.
it's a down year for U of D.
It
So
should be a win.
it should be a win. And then you come home, you're going to have, I believe, you're actually then at that point, you're going to go to Northern Kentucky. You're going to go to Wright State then too. So those are going to be 2 tough games, but I think Oakland's going to get healthy. Beck will be back at that point. Cumberland, unfortunately, has been lost for the season, but from all I'm hearing, you're going to have Brad Brechting back and James Beck. Those are 2 guys you didn't have before when you lost at home to those teams. So I think Oakland's going to have the better advantage to begin with. It's going to give them more opportunity off the bench to now not play 7-8 guys as much as Greg Kampe has liked this year.
And I think you bring up some very great points that are going to lead me into my next point I want to talk about here. Oakland really, for the first part of this season, has a big 3, and they run their offense. They run their game through their big 3 of Kendrick Nunn, Walker, and Hayes. And minutes may start to become a problem for this team. If you look here down the stretch, Kendrick Nunn's averaging 37 minutes a game. Then we have Jalen Hayes at about 35.8 minutes per game. And he's had 3 of his last 5 games. He's played 40+. That's huge, especially for college athletes. And then Martez Walker, just under 37 minutes per game. He too, 2 of the last 5, 40+. As you inch down the stretch here, and I'll look to Joe on this one, what do you think? Do you think they're going to have some heavy legs as we inch towards the Horizon Conference tournament?
They might. That's the only concern that I have for Oakland. Like Garrett said, though, they are getting their depth back, so hopefully that will alleviate a bit. But sometimes, too, when people are coming back from injuries, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to get their feet under them. So this big 3 for OU might have to play these heavy minutes for a little bit longer, and that is a little bit concerning. But they, like we said, they have a somewhat easier schedule. They'll get their depth back, and hopefully they can alleviate some of those minutes and then bring them back up for tournament time, because then they'll be ready. They've played heavy minutes, meaningful minutes in a lot of games, which is also valuable. Yes, it's a little bit like they might get heavy legs, but they should be okay.
They should be okay.
And I think Joey brings up a good point. Yeah, they should be fine. I mean, I've seen this year Kampe run a lot of three guard sets, even 4 guard sets. The good news is that while Oakland's getting healthy and they're getting some guys back, most notably Beck, Brechting, like I said, I'm not really sure on his decision. At the end of the day, if Isaiah Brock's in foul trouble, you still have Jalen Hayes that can do damage down low. They got Julius Palmer, Chris Palambizio, who are truly, really quality players down low. Kampe can run 3 guard sets, and he has no problem putting Braylon Neely at the point, putting Kendrick at the 2, and then having Martez be a wing player. And Martez, I think, is a little bit better as a wing player in that way. When he's off the ball, when he's not trying to be on the team's second best defender, when he's able to get on the wing, he makes plays. Because he can dribble so well, and he's so heads up out there. So when Tez is doing his thing, on the wing, Kampe's been doing good. So, the minutes are a concern, but I think Kampe wants it that way. I've listened to his coach's show before, and he's done coach's shows before, and he's always said, your best guys are your best guys, and they're going to play the most minutes. And so for him, he wants Kendrick to play 35 to 37 minutes a night. He wants Jalen to play about 32, 33. He wants Martez to do around the same thing. But Kampe's got depth there, so he can mix it up. He can put in Nick Daniels if Martez isn't shooting all that right. All right, Nick, you're going in. Braylon, we want you to go in. We'll shift Kendrick over to the 2, and then we'll run a different type of set. Kampe's one of the more innovative coaches because he's always thinking on
outside the box a little bit too.
Here's my question. So now that they, outside of the big 3, when they get this depth back, who do you think is that guy that needs to step up as kind of the, say, 4th option if one of those top 3 are not scoring well because they are such a high volume of shooters? Who's that 4th guy that if one of them is struggling in a big game and they need somebody to step up from that depth, Who do you think that is?
Oh, no question, Nick Daniels.
Yep, that's my pick too.
He's a fifth-year senior. He's a guy that's been in this program for, 4. He's basically played for 4 years for Campy and has had a significant role. I mean, he's this team's best 3-point shooter. Kendrick Nunn, yes, he's the best player on this team, but the best 3-point shooter, the guy I want to have the ball, the guy that can shoot us back into this game if I'm Oakland, is Nick Daniels. And you're going to have your depth back, yes, like Joey mentioned, but Daniels can put up 10 points in no time. He can be the microwave in a way. He can be like a Vinnie Johnson where he can put up 10, 15 points at will. And so when Oakland's trying to get down the stretch, they're going to put Daniels in. And that's what Campy's been doing the last couple of games. He's been putting Nick Daniels in, and he's been making time after time the right shot and the right look. And Nick's a pretty good passer, too. People don't give him that credit. He's a pretty decent passer out there. I mean, he was a point guard that they converted over to a 2-guard.
Yeah, and he's more than just that spot-up shooter on the perimeter, like you said. He can make plays out there. And Nick Daniels, he was my pick, too. I mean, he's shooting 40% from deep this year. They can run a lot more small ball sets to get Nick Daniels out playing with Martez, playing with Nunn, playing with Jalen Hayes to make sure the defense isn't pressing on him as much, giving him the open looks. That's huge. I mean, he's averaging 8.4 points per game right now. Like you said, he steps up. He gives you 10 minutes. He can give you 10 points per game in a minute. He's that good at spotting up, at shooting. And now we talked about this a little bit. Oakland's redemption schedule. They replay Northern Kentucky. It's a huge game on the road. They play Wright State on the road. They play Green Bay late in the year. Do you think this team has the will to go to those arenas and get a win and steal a game? I'll go to you, Joe.
Well, they have to. That's the shortcoming of it. They have to. And like Garrett said earlier, they played those teams really well without their depth. So this will be the real test, and this is where they have more of their actual team, that these are must-wins, obviously, going into tournament play. But it's going to be tough. It's always tough going on the road. But if they want to prove themselves and show that they're the real deal, which I think they are, like Garrett said, this is probably their best talent pool that they've had in a long time, maybe ever. And this is the test. This is it. This is how they get back and they can make a run.
And Campy has mentioned this before, and I think it's a very decent point. Aside of the Power 5, which is, the Power 5 conferences and whatnot, most of your conference champions, even in those leagues, depending on how quality a league it is, minimum 3 losses in conference for most of these teams too. Oakland's sitting at 3 conference losses right now. So they're kind of on par with most teams are going to be in the SEC and the ACC and in the Big Ten. That's just par for the course. Oakland has maybe a little bit of wiggle room in terms of they might be able to lose a game or two here or there, that maybe they just have a stinker at Northern Kentucky or they have a stinker at Wright State, but the Horizon League's just not a great league this year. So I anticipate them to do that. And when you have a trio, which Tom Izzo has gone out and said, and Bill Self, I think, said this too. I wasn't able to officially find it, but I believe Bill Self even came out and said that this big three that Oakland has could play on almost any Big Ten team and start. And I think that's very accurate because I think they're that good. I think there's a good chance that they do beat Northern Kentucky or Wright State on the road. I don't think they'll win both. But I wouldn't be shocked if they do go into Northern Kentucky and try and wipe away the nasty taste out of their mouth at home. I mean, Oakland is very tough to beat at home, and they hate it when they lose at home. I mean, they've had one of the best home records in all of college basketball the last 5 years. It's very tough for anyone to walk into the arena and win.
And sorry to cut you out there, but that was what was really scary to me. I know you're playing 2 really good teams in Northern Kentucky and Wright State back-to-back at the arena. But when you lose 2 straight, that hits your confidence level a little bit.
And I think they're going to be out for blood a little bit. So yeah. I do think that Oakland will win on the road. I can see if they win both, but realistically, I think they'll probably win one of those games. And the other one that they don't win is going to be a slugfest. It's going to be close. It's going to be Horizon League basketball like it always is.
Yeah, and you bring up some good points. Now, my confidence level in this OU team isn't as high as you, I would say. I mean, if I'm going to put a number on it, on if they can win the Horizon, if they can make some noise in the conference tournament, I'm shooting at about 35-40%. That's just where it comes down to. They got a tough road ahead of them. They kind of struggled early on. Heavy legs may be a factor. Their lack of depth beyond the big 3. If those guys come back, that'll play a huge role, but we just don't know. It's a lot of uncertainty here. And I know Joey wanted to bring this up too. There's a lot of hopeful thinking going around. What's your hopeful thinking when it comes to Oakland Golden Grizzly basketball?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, again, hypothetically, it's the best possible scenario is that if they win the Horizon League and they make the big dance, they make it into the NCAA tournament, they are the perfect upset alert team. It is exactly what you like to see on these smaller conferences that people take for granted. They have all this leadership. They have the big three that can just take on anybody in the country, honestly. And they're a run and gun offense. That's exactly what you see every year in the upsets. And they would be at a like 13, 14, 12 seed range, which is always that seed that is an upset. So granted, again, they have a lot of work to do. But if they can make it into the tournament, they're one of those teams that you have to be prepared for. You got to be a little bit scared of, honestly. And they need to win these games. This Northern Kentucky, they need to win Wright State. I think if they win both of those games, they will be sitting very well. And the confidence level to finish out the season should be pretty good.
Well, you're going to pass, Joe. You're going to pass the two teams who are ahead of you right now in the Horizon League standings, or at least one of them in Northern Kentucky was one loss. I mean, you put yourself in a good spot if you win both those games to still be the number one seed. And I've always been of the belief it's not necessarily what seed you're in, it's how well you play in March that really matters. And this team has to win the conference title, and they do. And the thing with them is they were on a lot of preseason picks to be the mid-major that's most bound for a Sweet 16 run or the most bound for an upset special. And with the way that we've seen this season pan out so far with a very underwhelming North Carolina team and the Kansases of the world, there's a good chance they might run into a Texas A&M or Arizona State as a 3 seed, maybe even as a 4 seed.
Exactly.
And you can't tell me that there's no possible way, even if they run into a Kentucky team that's just very young and very down, that they can't give them a scare.
Exactly. I mean,
because this year has been so down and so strange in college basketball. I mean, we're seeing teams that we've never seen before in the top 10. I mean, Texas Tech is up there. Auburn's up there. Right. I mean, this is just a very strange year in college basketball altogether.
And you know what? Doesn't matter what year it is. There's always something crazy happening in March. So if you can get to the big dance, anything can happen.
And I always like to say they already went to a big arena. They played at Little Caesars against Michigan State and almost took it away from them.
Yeah.
Like, that's a big game right there. So that's already like a tournament level type of game where they were in that game the whole time, made a few mistakes down the stretch, but they could have easily won that game. So that's a good test going into March where, you know, they need to be battle tested.
And Oakland, out of any of the other teams in the Horizon League, aside from potentially Northern Kentucky, has experience. You can't teach experience.
Exactly.
Jalen Hayes, Martez Walker, Nick Daniels, each have multiple years of experience playing the Horizon League. And I think it's very important for them moving forward because, as you mentioned, they played that game against Michigan State. Michigan State might end up playing as the number one seed out of LCA, because there are first and second round games coming to Little Caesars Arena this year for March Madness. So that's a good kind of tune-up game for them moving forward. And, if you're an MSU fan, thankfully, Bridges and Jackson woke up, but you can't teach experience. And I think that really bodes well for an Oakland team that wants to erase the sour taste in their mouth from last year. I mean, that was a bad, deteriorating loss for that team, the way that it ended last year at the Joe Louis Arena.
Yeah, it was. And some great OU talk
That was
there.
smart.
That was smart. And you know what? We're heading to break here. We're going to break it up a little bit. We're going to talk some Pistons hoops. We're going to talk some NBA stuff coming up after the break. And I just want to let our listeners and viewers know it's that time of year again. ONTV is prepping for our annual food drive to benefit the Oxford Orion FISH Food Pantry. The food drive is scheduled for Saturday, February 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Join us this year to stock those shelves. And for more information, call ONTV at 248-393-1060. We'll be right back.
Please remember that CFL bulbs, those curly, energy-efficient light bulbs everybody is using to save electricity, shouldn't be thrown away in your trash. Neither should batteries or home medical sharps. You can check with your local community to see where they can be recycled. Some retailers will allow you to bring them in for recycling. You can also order simple kits online that allow you to collect your recyclables and simply mail them away to be properly recycled. This green tip was brought to you by your friends at Waste Management.
And welcome back to the show. We are jumping into some pro hoops here now. And I want to talk about some Pistons because it feels like it's been a recurring segment here on the show.
Basketball.
That's
gimme,
right.
Gimme the ball because I'm gonna dunk it. Woo!
And that's not something the Pistons have been doing because they've not been playing well. The Pistons continue to kind of sink in the standings here. They're 1-2 over this last week. They beat Brooklyn, looked really good. Then they come out and lay a couple eggs to Chicago and Charlotte. Joey, what's going on with this team?
I don't know. It gets worse and worse every week, I feel like. And the biggest thing, too, for me is that, like we keep saying, they have all these injuries. They've had some injury problems. And out of all that, that is not their problem. Their problem is their lack of energy. They come out and they just don't look like they want to play at times. And they are really, really struggling to play defense. And everybody knows Detroit basketball is all about that defense. And we're just not playing it.
And you know what? You bring up a great point. The reason why they started off on a 14-6 start, they actually cared about the defensive side of the ball. Ever since then, they're 8-14. Or not 8-14. Yeah, they're 8-14 and not playing well. And it really comes down to their effort on the defensive side of the ball. Stan Van Gundy says it time and time again, post-interview after post-game interview. And just nothing's changing. I don't know if it's because injuries are kind of, the morale is down with the team and whatnot, but they're just not bringing it on that side of the ball. And you're not going to get it done when you're so hampered by injuries. You can't rely on your offense to score 120 points a game. It's just not going to happen. And when you're playing that poor defensively, the other team might score 122. We saw Charlotte come in and score almost 130 points against the Pistons. So that was a huge loss. I mean, they look good against Brooklyn. That was big. But we moved to Chicago, and we talked about this going into the game last week. That was going to be a tough one. Bulls playing well. They're getting players back from injury. Zach LaVine had his first game back from injury, of course, against the Pistons. And it was a tight game, a lot of lead changes. It's kind of a new-look Bulls team. Of course, the Pistons get them 4 times now after they're kind of playing well, which is unfortunate. What was your take with that game, Joe?
The Bulls are much better than people expected them to be. Everybody thought, okay, they're trading Jimmy Butler away. They're going to tank. They're going to just get ready for future seasons. But they're looking like they're going to be ready pretty quick here. And they are exactly what we keep talking about is the Pistons' biggest problem. Those stretch 4 guys that can shoot the ball and just leave Andre Drummond all alone.
Chris knows this. Chris knows how I feel about Lauri Markkanen. He knows how I feel about him. I love him. I wanted the Pistons to do anything they could in their right mind to draft him. I thought he was the best player, aside from Lonzo, aside from Tatum, aside from Fultz. He was the best player in that draft. The Pistons needed to go out and get him. And you saw that because the way he killed that team. And honestly, Chicago now does remind me in a way of the vintage Fred Hoiberg Iowa State teams. The stretch 4s. A very high-tempo point guard, Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine can shoot the lights out of the gym. I watched some of that game, and I'll admit, I haven't watched as much of the Pistons this year as I probably should have.
You're not missing that much, I'll tell you firsthand.
Chris, he knows how much I love Lauri Markkanen. So people keep sleeping on Chicago. I think it's dumb to do that. You can never sleep on Chicago. They're always going to be tough, and they're always going to want to smack you in the face. And, the Pistons didn't show up that game. I mean, they showed little bits of it here and there, but I think the biggest problem right now for the Pistons, and from what I've noticed watching it, is it just seems like the sets and the substitution sets are just very odd. Like SVG is just trying to go to certain guys just to teach them a lesson maybe, or just to hope that they get hot. Like maybe going to Luke coming off the bench, or maybe going to Bikes off the bench, because Ish isn't, Ish is 1 for 9 now. So hey, I'm just gonna try and do a heat check thing. I hope he does good. Okay. Tobias is okay, but he made a bad play, so I'm just gonna put in Anthony Tolliver and teach him. It's very odd. It's very odd substitution patterns when I see them happen, and I don't know if it's hurting this team. I don't know if it is truly because that this team maybe doesn't have the depth on the bench that they should because of injuries. Like I have no answer for it.
And you bring up a really good point. Joey and I talk about this probably week in and week out now.
Yep.
SVG, his rotations really seem to be hampering the Pistons throughout the game. I know he's a very good coach. There's a reason why he's getting paid a lot of money to coach basketball.
He's very meticulous in the way that he likes to do things, and he has problems adjusting, I feel like, is
He
kind of
sticks
an
to the
issue.
plan a little too much.
Yeah.
He doesn't like to call audibles throughout the game with how the game is being played. He likes to stick to the game plan through and through. And you know what? That really hasn't been working, especially after that 14-6 start. Your team's not at full strength. You have to start to be reading the situation a lot better if you're Stan Van Gundy and start to put players in that are actually producing. Yeah, okay, then maybe he missed a defensive assignment one time. Leave him in there because he's producing offensively. And defense, honestly, don't worry too much about defense now because your team is not committed to play. It's just not. They're not.
Another thing I think, too, that people don't make it out to be is that the Pistons actually got out to a decent start, but that's also because they got lucky and faced certain teams at the right time. When they went out to the West Coast, they hit a Warriors team that was struggling at the time, and T-Wolves team that's obviously one of the best teams in the West, maybe one of the best teams in all of the league. It's really when you play some of these guys, and they have increased the difficulty on the schedule. I mean, when you are consistently over the holiday playing tougher opponents, and you're playing Indiana, a team that's very rough and rugged, when you're playing the Bucks more. I mean, this division that the Pistons are in is still a very black and blue division, and because Milwaukee's going to get you out and run. Indiana can get you out and run if they want. Cleveland obviously is Cleveland. The Pistons have had a tougher schedule of late, and I don't blame them for that because when you are 14-6, it takes you a while to adjust. And then you start losing 5 or 6 in a row. Now all of a sudden, now the wheels are falling off. What do we got to do? Now we got to finally readjust. The ship's going to find its water at some point. And I'm concerned, but I'm not totally worried. I'm not pushing the panic button just yet.
Oh, I'm pushing the panic button.
See, I think the ship's taking a lot of water.
Yeah, I think this game exactly too against Chicago was a big problem because the Pistons lost by 2. It was 108-106. It showed exactly the Pistons have no closer. They have a lack of a closer, which is a big issue in the NBA. You need somebody to come in and finish games for you. They missed 4 shots to end the game. And Andre Drummond, what the heck, man?
I'm not even worried about.
He missed a layup with 38 seconds. He missed a layup in the NBA.
You know who else missed a layup?
He's supposed to be one of the best players on our team, and he missed a layup with 38 seconds left.
Reggie Bullock. I mean, to end that game, you have a 2-on-1 fast break led by, you force a turnover, awesome. You're in transition. You never call a timeout. It was the right call to keep going. Reggie gets the steal. He's on the left side of the wing. He goes all the way to the basket, tries to finish over Chris Dunn when he has Tobias a good 3 feet behind him where you can just drop him off and let your best player decide the game. Don't let your role players decide it. I mean, the NBA later came back with their last 2-minute report and said Reggie Bullock was fouled, but refs don't call that at the end of the games. It just doesn't happen in the NBA.
Right, you can't just go into it expecting it. You have to go in like you're not going to get a foul. You're not going to get the charge that you want or the call that you want.
Exactly. And you know what? I think Tobias, he is the better finisher, and you would have had a better chance if Tobias had that opportunity to shoot that last shot.
And you look again, too, though, the Pistons gave up 17 threes in this game. You keep seeing that all year long. Oh, the Pistons gave up this many threes to this team. This team has a new career, like a team high in 3-point attempts, 3-point makes.
And it's to what you've been saying for the past few weeks. It's that dribble penetration by their guards. Ish Smith is just not a great defender. He doesn't keep guards out of the paint. And when Chris Dunn's attacking the lane, he's kicking it out to Nikola Mirotic on the perimeter. He's kicking out to Garrett's guy, Lauri Markkanen, marking it up from the outside.
The Finnish marksman.
I like that. The marksman. But yeah, it's just really disheartening to see this team play defense. And that even led into the matchup on Martin Luther King Day against the Hornets.
And it's not going to get much better, Chris, because Wednesday, so the day that this is being filmed, they play the Raptors. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, very good athletic backcourt that can just push the basketball and just shoot at will. Do the dribble penetration.
You're gonna have issues.
Bradley Beal, John Wall coming I almost said the Palace. I almost said the Palace.
The Pizza Palace.
The Pizza Palace. Yes,
coming in honor of the Palace.
the Pizza Palace on Friday. Okay, then you have Brooklyn on Sunday. Then you're gonna have a very tough test with Utah, who's big up front, and then Russ Westbrook, and then you're gonna have a home and home with Cleveland end the year. It's not going to get much better, especially if this team's struggling to defend the perimeter the way that they are. Out of those teams that I told you, maybe one of them has no 3-point presence, and even then, they still have a quality team in Utah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's this team's got to get better on that end, and that's what Stan Van Gundy preaches. He preaches that that perimeter defense.
And you know what? You start to wonder, is the team really listening? Because it just doesn't sink in.
Well,
And-
and that was the
Well,
biggest
let's
thing
be
too.
fair here, though. I mean, you have a slight drop off from Reggie Jackson to Ish Smith, but the drop off between Ish Smith and Dwight Bikes, like, yeah.
Hey, don't be hating on my guy Dwight Bikes. He's playing well. I mean, I know he shoots a lot of shots that maybe he shouldn't be shooting, but
But you go to the concern saying that, okay, there's not a lot of guys that are not a lot of teams left that don't have that 3-point offense. Well, we just played a team in the Hornets that aren't really that 3-point offense, and we got crushed by them. We looked even worse than we did against the Bulls, which
yeah, we
is
did.
my biggest
And they have
concern.
a similar type build as the Jazz. So.
Exactly. So that is the biggest concern, is now that they've lost this game against the struggling Hornets. Granted, they have great talent. They should be playing much better than they are. And Steve Clifford coming back, maybe that'll get them going. But this was the biggest loss.
And you know what? Kemba has struggled early on too, and that to not take advantage of a game where Kemba's just not playing well. I mean, he picked it up a little bit in the second half, but it was mostly the Dwight Howard show,
Yeah.
circa 2011. I mean, this
Mhm.
guy, I think whenever he sees Andre Drummond across, he just wants to give him everything he's got. Dwight had 21 and 17, 4 blocks. Not to mention he blocked Andre Drummond when Andre was going in hard for a jam on Dwight. So that's it. You see a different Dwight Howard.
Well,
when
that's
he
like I
plays
said in the
Pistons.
past. I've said in the past too, is that like Andre Drummond is like a mini Dwight Howard. Like, you draw a lot of comparisons to him. We were saying kind of the charisma thing. Andre started to get a little bit more lighthearted. That's kind of a Dwight Howard thing. He's that more like prototypical center that just gets rebounds and finishes at the basket. And Dwight Howard proved that he is still able to dominate in the paint. And Andre Drummond was in complete non-factor in that game, and that is very concerning, being one of the biggest talents that we have on this team.
And one thing I think that scares me about him especially is, okay, you saw how Drummond was against Howard. He's going to be going up against 2 quality centers himself this week with Jonas Valanciunas and my boy, the Polish Hammer, Marcin Gortat. And then, Gobert comes up next week at home. It's like you're lining him up to give Andre Drummond a test, and he's being paid to be your best player on this roster,
And he already struggles to guard the stretch 4.
Yeah, definitely. And
which all 3 of those teams have.
exactly. And another thing I want to bring up here too, as we're a good month in now on the Reggie Jackson injury, and you kind of can start to look at stats and how their offense has been running. And the offense, the flow has been a lot better. You see the team running up tempo. You see them getting shots from the perimeter, which is good. But the production hasn't been there. If you look at the stats, their field goal percentage is down since Reggie's been gone. Their 3-point field goal percentage is down. Now, my question is this going to be a trend for the team? Or is it just about leveling it out and getting used to Ish Smith as that starting point guard?
I hope that they're just leveling it out, but I'm concerned that it's not. And they just have so many issues, and it's not even about the Reggie Jackson thing. Like I said, it's about the energy, the effort to play defense. Their offense has been great. Honestly, their depth is great. They've been playing good. Like the other night, they had 5 guys with over 10 or 15 points in double digits. That's what you want out of a team. You want to have some depth. And the only way they seem to win is if Tobias Harris scores 30 or more. And you can't have him do that every night. He's not that kind of player. And they just need to step up on their defense, and that's the biggest concern.
And I saw an interesting stat today. I mean, when Tobias gets 10 field goal attempts per game, the Pistons are 13-6. So that's a very telling stat. Tobias needs the looks.
I just think with Reggie gone, and this is completely, not stat related, but Reggie, he's not a jerk, but he plays with a lot of passion. He's a guy that's a very passionate guy out there. He has that leadership. I don't know if he has the leadership type quality, but he exerts a lot of those leadership type things with the way he plays
at
with
least
his passion.
tries. He tries to be a
And
leader.
when you don't have that kind of guy on the floor, who's going to step up? Andre Drummond's certainly not going to be that guy.
They don't have that leader.
I mean, Stanley can have that at points,
But
but
he's
I mean,
not
Stanley's not playing right now. Tobias is, okay, your best player, but I don't see Tobias as this cold-blooded killer, this guy that can, be your heart and soul guy. And yeah, you've got guys like that on your bench, but I just think this team has lost, with Reggie, has lost some of that brashness that they needed, because Reggie has some very bad nights. And yes, he's kind of like Drummond where he ebbs and flows.
Yeah, definitely,
But
definitely.
Reggie coming in with that kind of smugness, I guess, and being that jerk. You need that jerk every now and again to keep everybody in line. This team's looked a little soft. Since
Exactly. And you bring up some great points. We're going to get into it some more. We're going to talk about the hunt for playoffs because we're getting to that time. We're going to take it to break here on the local voice on Orion Neighborhood Television.
This is Lake Orion's own, the local voice. Call ONTV and get on air 248-393-1060. Let your voice be heard. Internet radio for all. Call ONTV and get on air.
Welcome back to Views from the Sideline on the local voice on Orion Neighborhood Television. We're talking Pistons hoops here now and kind of the hunt for the playoffs because early in the season, we had the Pistons looking like they're cementing their spot in the top 4. That's not the case anymore. Teams behind them are on the rise. The Pistons sit at the 8th spot right now, 22-20, and it's not looking too good. Philly's coming up. They're 20-20 at the 9th spot, and they own the tiebreaker for the Pistons. So you have a lot of teams coming up. Joey, I'm going to hand this to you. You're kind of the Pistons realist here on the show. Do you think they're going to get out of this tough stretch of the schedule in the playoffs?
I hate to say it, but I don't think so. Granted that the start that they had to this season was amazing, and I don't think anybody expected them to finish there in that top 4. Some of us were hopeful, but I thought the decline would have been a little bit steady, and it just is kind of fallen very fast. And like you said, Philadelphia is right there. New York is right there. Charlotte is even creeping back in, and Chicago has a chance with this win streak that they're on. And I'm just concerned that all of these teams are kind of on the rise as the Pistons are falling. And the only teams that are falling ahead of the Pistons is Cleveland, which they're going to be fine.
Exactly.
Nobody's concerned about Cleveland missing the playoffs. So they're sitting in 8th right now. They're playing the Raptors tonight, which is almost an automatic loss. Maybe they come out with one of those crazy victories that they've had, but I don't know. It's concerning.
Now, before the show, Joe, we talked about what are some predictions going into the new year that you'll see. You brought up a bold prediction. I want you to tell the people what that is. What's your bold prediction for the Pistons?
Well, as I said, I think they're going to miss the playoffs. And if they miss the playoffs, I'm thinking this Stan Van Gundy era might be coming to a close. And if it doesn't, we might have some people that are upset, particularly myself.
Wow.
I think
hot take.
his time here has been a failure.
You're giving him the F?
He didn't get what he was supposed to get done. He didn't get it done. They made the playoffs. Yeah. A very disappointing playoff run. But look at the acquisitions that they've made. So they got Tobias. That was an A+ deal. They stole him from Orlando for sure.
Highway robbery.
We signed Avery Bradley. I give that an A-.
Great.
He's done pretty well. He's been injured.
Lock
Offense,
the man up.
His offense hasn't improved like some people thought it might. John Lure, you can't even give that guy a grade. He hasn't played for the team
He
very
played
much.
F-.
Yeah, pretty much. Stanley Johnson, the draft pick. We talk about draft picks all the time and the issue that Stan Van Gundy has had drafting players.
And the fact that he's not Devin Booker.
Yeah, or Lauri Markkanen, or Donovan Mitchell, or. And then we got Henry Ellenson. He looked pretty good in some of the preseason summer league games.
And late last year, too.
Where has he been? We haven't even given him a chance lately.
Because he's a defensive liability.
Uh,
Even though his team is a defensive liability.
Yeah, I was going to say the whole defensive team. Langston Galloway.
He doesn't play anymore.
Oh, boy.
He is so up and down. The only thing that I like is Luke Kennard. And granted, we could have gotten better players than Luke Kennard, but I think he's played well enough to say that that's an all right
And
draft.
I think you bring up a good point, too. Luke Kennard he's already Stan Van Gundy's best draft pick.
Which is sad.
And him and Spencer Dinwiddie, who doesn't even play for you anymore.
Yeah, that's a nightmare.
And it's huge. I mean, you're saying get rid of SVG. It's time. Now, you want to get rid of him. I know you're about making moves to try to improve this team. What's kind of the core group of players that you want to build around? If you're running this team, if you're in the front office, what are your 2 players? What are your 3 players that you're building around?
I think Luke Kennard, because of the way that he's shown right away in his limited minutes that he can come in and he has confidence in his shot. A lot of people gave him a lot of crap getting drafted that maybe he would struggle defensively, which he does a little bit, and that maybe he wouldn't be that go-to shooter that he can be. I think he can be a great shooter. He's not going to be a star player, obviously, but he's going to be a great shooter, and he can get buckets. I think you keep Tobias. He's been great. He's a multifaceted player. Andre, I was going to say before the show that he would be for sure, but the more that I think about it, the more that I talk about it, Andre, I don't know if he's that future player that you want to build around necessarily. And that's probably about it.
Now, I want to bring Garrett in on here because
Okay.
he's been known for his love for a guy such as his name as Avery Bradley. And that's I'm interested to see. And what are your core players that you would build around if you're in the front office of the Detroit Pistons?
Avery Bradley's one.
You are locking him up this summer.
Listen, I think you can't teach the type of defense and the tenacity on the defensive end of the floor that he brings. You can't teach it. And I don't care if he scores 12 points a night. I want him on my floor because of the way he is defensively and how he is as a leader and how he is as an overall veteran to this team. Lock him up.
Now, is Avery your only core guy that you want locked up? Is there anybody else on this roster that you really want to see in a Pistons
There's three
uniform?
other guys I want.
All right, let's hear it.
I want Tobias. I'm going to go with Joey. I think Luke Kennard. This next one, I think I might get a little ridiculed for. I still love Stanley. I still love Stanley because here's the thing with Stan.
But you are a defensive guy, so
I love the defense,
can
but I
understand.
still think with him you can save his shot and you still can save his offensive ability. When you give him a chance to shoot, I mean, you don't forget how to shoot. It's just how many looks you actually get. And so for me, I still think there's something there with Stan that I think you can. I've always thought it's easier to teach offense than it is to teach defense. And I still think there's something there. And if I'm trying to build a team that's defensively minded, that can still create on the floor, Tobias can create on the floor. Avery Bradley can still score 15, 20 points a night if you absolutely need him to do so. And then you still got Luke Kennard, who's going to be your best shooter. So right there, you've got three quality scoring options. It's not bad to have a guy like Stanley Johnson on this roster.
Now, I noticed that you added Stanley Johnson, but left off a guy by the name of Andre Drummond. Was that by coincidence, or was that some disagreement there with your thoughts?
I'm a big Drummond guy, but I just think the way that the game's going now, it doesn't make sense to have a guy who's just really one-dimensional.
And not really part of your core.
Not really part of your core. I do think he's a great player, though, no doubt. He's very good on the defensive end of the floor. He's a very good rebounder when he wants to be. But, that's his problem is when he wants to be. At some point, you do have these teams where, okay, Philly's kind of the anomaly of it, but, you have guys that even with, for example, Washington, Gortat's not just a rebounder. He's a good scorer. He can make a shot from 15 feet. He's a guy who can rebound and distribute the basketball pretty well. I don't see Drummond posting up from 15 feet.
I mean, he tried to last year.
And that's a guy who's probably the fifth scoring option for that Wizards team. I would rather have Marcin Gortat right now than Andre Drummond on this Pistons roster.
Wow. Talk about hot takes
And you
there.
put the point, though, all these big guys that have been in the league for a while, and they're played like natural centers, but over the course of the years, as the game has changed, they've tried to develop their game. Andre Drummond, they kind of experimented with that a little bit last year, tried to give him the ball more, score more, which I didn't like in the beginning. It didn't work out. He's not that scorer that you can go to and just get offense.
And Joey, it's one thing if you're a scorer down low. Like Drummond, I don't mind the fact that Drummond's a prototypical center because he's down low. It's developing your game outside of the paint. Like at some point,
Exactly.
I want a guy to have elite level skill down low, near the cylinder, being able to be a menace in the paint. But that can't be the only thing you are. You need to be a good shooter. You need to be a good distributor of the basketball,
Right.
especially if you're running a dribble drive or dribble penetration, which Stan loves to do.
Right,
Like,
that's
you
what I'm
can't-
saying. They have to adjust. He has to adjust to the new style of offense.
Yeah, definitely. And you guys bring up some great points here. We're up against the wall, so I want to get to our last segment here and get Garrett's take on it. It's the burning takes. We got a couple minutes here left on the show. My burning take is still ongoing. I have the Pistons losing tonight, losing against Washington on Friday, make that 1-4 stretch. That's my burning take from last week. Joey, you got any burning takes to give out to the people this week?
It's going off of last week. Pistons are going to miss the playoffs, and they're going to miss making any deal at the trade deadline. I feel like I'm literally nervous. They keep saying that they're shopping everyone, that almost everybody's available, but I think they're not going to get what they want, and it's not going to be a great acquisition no matter what because of the assets they have, the cap issues, and just in being in that middle ground. They don't have good draft picks to give up, and it's just going to be it's going to get worse. And they're probably not going to make a big enough deal where it's going to matter to make a playoff push. They're going to miss the playoffs, and Stan Van Gundy is going to be cut.
Wow.
I think at the end of the year he needs to be
he might step down.
needs to thoroughly be looked
As
at.
the head coach and a president of basketball ops, or both?
Got to be both. You got to be both.
It would be both. It would be great if he would just jump down from the GM and give that up. I would be okay with that.
And I want to jump to Garrett. We got a few minutes left here. Give the people your burn and take here, Garrett.
So I'm gonna say Pistons go 500 the next 2 weeks. They'll beat the Cavs once when they play in the home and home, and I think they steal a game against the Wizards at home.
I mean, I think if they go 500, that's a good.
I also have another one though, and I think this one's gonna be interesting. I think Michigan goes on a little bit of a Michigan basketball goes on a little bit of a tail slide here. You're playing a little bit above your head. This is still a very good basketball team, but they're going on a little bit of a tail. They're riding high a little bit. I think maybe they're going to come back down to earth a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if they lose a couple really bad games here this week.
Bold predictions by Joey and Garrett. And that's about going to do it here for Views from the Sideline, Episode 3. Having our inaugural guest, Garrett Kolodzieg, joining the show. You can hear him weeknights, Tuesday, 8 p.m., Colo Sports Corner, 88.3 WXOU The Grizz. Also find him in the Twitter sphere at Colo Sports Corner, WXOU. That'll do it for us here today. Thanks for coming on, Garrett. For me, Joey, I'm signing off. See ya.